You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. Genesis Market gets taken down. Proxyjackers exploit Log4j vulnerabilities. Fast encrypting Rorschach ransomware uses DLL sideloading. Killnet attempts DDoS attacks against the German ministry. Herolterio ponders AI-assisted cheating. Johannes Ulrich tracks malware injected in a popular tax filing website. And soft power and Russia's hybrid war. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. Popular online cybercriminal shop Genesis Market was seized by the FBI in an action that resulted in a takedown on Tuesday. The criminal operation has been linked to millions of cyber incidents across the world, with over 80 million stolen credentials and fingerprints present on the site, BleepingComputer reports. The record describes Genesis Market as a one-stop shop for criminals, selling both stolen credentials and the tools to weaponize that data. Unlike other criminal marketplaces, Genesis was unique in that it provided criminals with access to bots and browser fingerprints. These enabled malicious actors to access a victim's subscription platforms and banking services in a way that bypasses security warnings. Matthew Gracie McGinn, head of threat research at Natatia, said, "The Genesis Market was an invite-only marketplace that sells only what the market owners term bots. However, you could still discover it through a normal search engine." CNN reports that the FBI's Operation Cookie Monster was broad in scope, with many international law enforcement agencies participating. It followed a series of law enforcement operations involving coordinated arrests and raids. In January of last year, the FBI and Europol seized computer servers involved in criminal activity, and more recently, the FBI raided breach forums and arrested its alleged proprietor. Sysdig reports a wave of proxy jacking against devices vulnerable to Log4j exploitation for remote code execution. It's a criminal-to-criminal play, an illicit version of legitimate proxy sharing arrangements in which users agree to rent out their bandwidth. In proxy jacking, the arrangement is not only uncompensated, but it's also forced into a device without the owner's consent. There's an obvious analogy with cryptojacking. As Sysdig explains, proxy jacking is a foil to cryptojacking in that it mainly aims to make use of network resources, leaving a minimal CPU footprint. And of course, the resources can be resold on the criminal market. Check Point is tracking a new strain of ransomware called Rorschach, which is one of the fastest ransomware observed by speed of encryption. The researchers note that the ransomware was deployed using DLL sideloading of a Cortex XDR dump service tool, a signed commercial security product, a loading method which is not commonly used to load ransomware. Check Point notified Palo Alto Networks, and Palo Alto stated, Palo Alto Networks has verified that Cortex XDR 7.7 and newer versions, with Content Update version 2.4.0, released November 2021, and later content updates detect and block the ransomware. A new content update will be released next week to detect and prevent the usage of this DLL sideloading technique. The Russian hacktivist auxiliaries of Killnet have attempted to disable a recently established German government website devoted to the economic reconstruction of Ukraine. The distributed denial of service attacks have so far successfully been repelled, a representative of the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development told Spiegel. TVP World reports that the attacks began last week when the BMZ established the site and continued into yesterday. Proofpoint's report last week on Winter Wyvern, also known as TA-473, described the Russian threat actor's exploitation of a Zimbra vulnerability, CVE 2022-27926, to gain access to Zimbra-hosted webmail portals from which the threat actor can gain access to NATO organizations involved with support for Ukraine. Winter Wyvern impersonates Western organizations to conduct highly targeted, carefully prepared phishing operations against its targets. On Monday, CISA added CVE 2022-27926 to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. U.S. federal civilian executive branch organizations have until April 24th to check their systems and secure them. Speaking of CISA, Director Jen Easterly told the Washington Examiner that, surprising as it's been, that Russia hasn't hit U.S. targets harder to disrupt American support for Ukraine, Russia hasn't been idle in the cyberspace around Ukraine proper. Easterly said, Frankly, I'm surprised that we have not seen attacks against critical infrastructure at home. Russia's relative restraint seems, she suggests, due to deterrence. Russia understands that the U.S. would regard a major attack as highly escalatory. She added, I also think they've been very, very busy in Ukraine. Though we very much focus on the kinetic activity because it's so horrific, there's been a lot of cyber activity against Ukraine's critical infrastructure, civilian infrastructure. The Council on Foreign Relations has an essay on one lesson that might be easily overlooked. In the piece, author Jason Healy argues that Ukrainian resilience in the face of Russian cyber attacks is evidence of the importance of soft power in cyber conflict, stating, Ukraine's cyber defenses have been remarkably resilient. There are multiple sources of this defensive strength, in particular the savvy, energy, and determination of Ukrainian cyber organizations, who've been adapting to Russian offensive campaigns since at least 2014, has been critical. Kyiv has also been backed by cyber defense assistance from the private sector and offensive and defensive cyber interventions by U.S. Cyber Command. These advantages were driven in large part by the strength of Ukrainian soft power, connections to allies, global tech firms, and networks of information security researchers allow states to mobilize defenses unavailable to others. So, alliances, commerce, diplomacy, regular back and forth, all of these lend important resilience in cyberspace, and that's not a lesson out of the grand illusion either, but right off of the virtual battlefield. Coming up after the break, Carol Theriault ponders AI-assisted cheating. Johannes Ulrich tracks malware injected into a popular tax filing website. Stay with us.
Never refactor your apps again. Never get locked into an IDP. Say goodbye to your old on-prem systems and identity management complexity. Now you can solve your biggest IAM problems with identity orchestration, even the messy ones you thought were unsolvable. Bring Strata any IAM use case like modernizing legacy apps to use passwordless authentication, migrating from one IDP to another, or enabling identity operation resiliency. Strata's identity orchestration platform is designed to extend the value of your identity infrastructure, no matter the complexity or scale. What's more, Strata's software is lightweight and flexible, developer-friendly, and vendor-agnostic. Want to see it in action? Share your identity challenge with Strata on a discovery call, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire.
CISOs everywhere invest huge amounts of time and money to defend against external threats and protect sensitive data stored inside their organizations. But how do they protect sensitive data that's constantly being shared outside with others? The answer is data-centric security from Virtru. It's affordable, simple to deploy, and integrates elegantly with the collaboration apps you use every day, like Google Workspace and Microsoft 365. Trusted by more than 8,000 organizations, you can try Virtru for free. Just visit virtru.com/cyberwire. That's virtru.com/cyberwire. I think many of us of a certain age are glad that the internet wasn't around when we were foolish youths. In high school and middle school, that not everyone was carrying a camera around, or there was a permanent record of every message you sent to each other. But what about schoolwork? What about cheating in class and artificial intelligence? Carol Theriault has been pondering that question, and she files this report.
Today, we have Vanya Schweitzer. Vanya being a threat researcher at Cisco with 20 years under his belt in the industry. What he thought about the industry and how it's going to respond to this whole new ChatGPT and OpenAI and Microsoft's version and Google's version, and how is the security industry responding to that?
Yes, there's certainly interesting times, and I think security industry is one of the industries which is very happy to adopt kind of machine learning and artificial intelligence, let's call them. But we started very early, with anti-spam and classification with Bayesian filtering, which was basically a probability filtering, where you would get if you receive an email, you would get a probability whether some email is spam or not. So it's a kind of machine learning, let's say, and from then on we move onwards to different models or different ways of classifying malicious content, and I think that will definitely continue in the future. There's almost no product today on the market which won't use machine learning and artificial intelligence technology in one way or another. So with ChatGPT, I think we were all kind of surprised by the simplicity of it and how well it can generate text that's much more user-friendly as opposed to, let's say, Googling in a search engine. I mean, we are so much used to Google and how we create those queries and what kind of results do we get, that now this sort of fundamental change of being able to describe what you want to some bot that comes back, that essentially has the knowledge of the internet at some point, and generates the most probable text and the most probable output of what you described in the input is very fascinating.
So do you think we might see a world where we're going to have basically automated threats being fought with automated security tools? That's what that's the road we're going down, isn't it, really? And we're going to sit back eating popcorn.
It's difficult to say. We certainly are not yet there. And even if you can convince ChatGPT to write some malicious code, that code is actually quite basic compared to the state of the art of the malware code we are seeing today. And
Right.
a lot of time when you write something, you really, as a user of it, you need to have such a good experience because the generated code is not always up to scratch, and generated text, for example, certainly with some fact is misleading, and some of the facts are not certainly not correct, and the same way it is with the code. So far it's able to create some code. It needs a lot of hand holding to create a little bit more advanced code, but a lot of user intervention is required. Now, how it's going to develop, whether ChatGPT 10 or whichever version comes will have this ability, and certainly the whole artificial intelligence community is working on new algorithms, and so you never know when a new revolutionary transformer will appear again.
Yeah, I think that's the big concern I have. There's a lot of players in the market all playing with quite powerful little tools, and who knows what's going to spring up where. So we're all watching everything all the time.
Yeah, we see now that the ChatGPT API is included in many kind of security research and defending side, the little projects, but also on the offensive side, and trying to kind of reuse the knowledge there in adopting to the environment and attacking some organization. We'll see what will happen, but the fact is that the technology they already have is still pretty reasonably effective for them, so they don't have to go and reinvent something completely new at a time.
Yeah, well, as you say, it's interesting times.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your worldview with us, Vanya Schweitzer, threat researcher at Cisco Talis. This was Carol Theriault for the CyberWire.
And it is always my pleasure to welcome back to the show Johannes Ulrich. He is the Dean of Research at the SANS Technology Institute and also the host of the ISC Stormcast podcast. Johannes, welcome back.
Great to be here, Dave.
So you and your colleagues are tracking an interesting development here with a tax filing online service. What can you share with us today?
Yeah, it's of course interesting that this happened sort of right in the midst of tax season. efile.com, a website that offers e-filing services, as the name implies, was apparently compromised, and was compromised around mid-March, stayed compromised at least until sort of the first weekend in April here. What happened was that malicious code was added to a JavaScript file on the site that directed users to an error page that looked fairly good. It looked like any other browser error page, but it told the user that, hey, you can't connect to this website because your browser is out of date. And by the way, here we have an update for you. Of course, this update turned out to be malicious and implemented a simple backdoor on victim systems.
So how do you suppose eFile could have found themselves victim of this sort of thing?
I think it sort of falls in the category of sort of supply chain attack. Some other people noticed that the file actually was modified beginning of March, but that modification looked benign, something that a developer may have done. It was just simply a couple lines being added to the file. The file itself is legit. It's called popper.js. It's part of sort of the larger Bootstrap framework. So many sites have a file by that name with that content minus the malicious lines. Couple options here. Maybe a developer copied the file from the wrong location that was sort of already sort of pre-pwned essentially, or a developer's workstation got compromised and an attacker noticed how developer was experimenting with this file and then figured out that, hey, I can add my own code here. Developer will probably not notice.
And what does it seem like the bad guys are after here?
The bad guys pretty much are after remote control of victim systems. It's a fairly generic, if somewhat cumbersome backdoor. What's almost more scary about it is based on the way the backdoor is coded, we are not dealing with advanced, sophisticated adversaries here. Let's call them the not so advanced persistent threat. Someone who probably stumbled over the ability to edit that file more or less by accident, then figured out, hey, let me experiment with a backdoor here. That's sort of what it looked like.
Any response from the folks at eFile?
I reported to them as we saw it first, and via their support page. They basically asked for details, but that's where it stopped. Haven't heard from them at all. They removed the malicious part of the JavaScript on Monday or Tuesday morning. So it was the April the 4th. And on April the 5th, so Wednesday, they actually reverted to an older version of the website. If you're going to the website now with that older version, it's had lots of references to 2021. Also, a lot of the additional content is being gone. So they're probably in some form of incident response mode while still trying to keep the business running. That's sort of what it appears to me. The website is still not configured right. Like there's still very verbose error messages and a couple things like this. eFile.com, the company itself, actually, if you try to figure out anything about them, there isn't really much to them. They don't hire people, it appears. They don't really have any sort of named executives that I could find. I don't know. It's sort of a company with there's no LinkedIn presence or so from everybody. When we try to reach out to them, this is of course always sort of how you try to get into contact with something, alert them of this issue. It was kind of hard to figure out, how to get in touch with them at all.
But it's fair to say that eFile itself is a legit business, and the service they provide is the real deal.
Yeah, it's a perfectly legit website. It's certified by the IRS to provide e-filing services. So it's not that it's an outright malicious website. That's not the case. It's a perfectly legit website. And like I said, it's authorized by the IRS. I verified this. And that's not anything. It's not that easy to verify on the IRS website. But yes, there is a note that eFile.com does business with the IRS. And so they didn't just copy and paste the logo to their website.
Is the lesson here to be cautious of a site telling you that you need to update your browser?
Definitely. So that's something that you definitely should never do if a site does that. If that ever happens, close your browser and then use the browser's built-in update mechanism to verify if the browser is indeed out of date. This can happen, but you should never just download anything because a website tells you to. That would definitely be odd. The tricky part here, of course, is that if a trusted website like this is compromised, the attacker could tell you, hey, this is tax filing software that you need for eFile.com. And that, of course, would be even more difficult to figure out for a victim, not to give any attackers any ideas. But this attack was definitely not sort of used to its full potential.
Yeah. And of course, just timing-wise, it is that busy time of year for a company like eFile, and also for the folks who'd be using it, it's time-sensitive as well. Exactly,
and that's the other thing with anything time-sensitive like this. I know we all like to file our taxes on the 15th, but do it a little bit earlier. So if something like this happens, you have time to react, you have time to think, and maybe go to a different site. Making decisions under duress, kind of, if you have to get those taxes filed today, is always dangerous.
All right. Well, there are more details here if folks are interested over on the ISC section of the SANS website. Johannes Ulrich, thanks for joining us. And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security, because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by John Petrick. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. This episode is made possible in part by RSA Conference, where the world talks security. Through global events and year-round content, RSAC connects you to cybersecurity leaders and cutting-edge ideas for a safer, more secure future. Learn more at rsaconference.com/cyberwire23.